Welcome to Quick Stop F1. My name is Nyasha, and you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. We appreciate that. Joining me on the show today is, look, in a week where we've had all kinds of discussions around brake locking and brake bias, and there's talks about overtaking and line taking due to wet weather and hazardous conditions, all of that. Who better to get on than someone who has gone toe-to-toe at one point in a skills challenge with Sebastian Vettel and put him in the mud? Huh? It's none other than my friend, your friend, maybe not the Orange Army's friend, but he's still our friend. It's Mr. Brad Philpott. How you doing, Brad?
Hey, I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, how long can I keep dining out on that thing from 2015 that you just referenced?
Forever.
It's
Forever.
Like we're over a decade out now from that. So you have to start picking out drivers who were there who are still active. So Verline, I was at Formula E at the weekend. He just came third in the Formula E Championship. So he was there. Yeah, I beat him. Yeah. Ricardo's gone. Can't use him.
He's gone. Can't use him.
Button,
sorry.
They're long gone. Everyone's gone.
Everyone's
Hulkenberg.
gone.
I beat Hulkenberg, and he got a podium. So there we go. There's the relevant.
Look, if it was me, I've dined out on much less for much longer, so don't even worry about that. But no, thank you. But also, you're actually currently doing a lot of driving, a lot of karting on your channel, which I'm loving. And we'll get into that at the end of the show. But if you're watching, thank you for watching. You can subscribe to the channel. You can give us a like on this video as well. That helps. Obviously, if you're listening on Spotify, you can leave us a 5-star rating. If you're on Apple, please leave us a review. Super helps. And the Patreon will be there for ad-free streaming of this whole podcast. Brad, what a Formula One World Championship we have at the moment. And I say what a championship, but it feels like we're hurtling towards the most underwhelming two-man world inter-team world championship in the world, one that seems devoid of needle or any kind of real like wheel-to-wheel racing. However, nevertheless, we have got a world championship battle on our hand pretty clear now. Two people, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. Lando Norris has won the last two races before this weekend, and then this weekend Oscar Piastri second in the sprint race and first in the main race, 16 points ahead. I guess before we get into the race itself, and I guess, you know, Oscar, Lando, and your kind of thoughts on their performance, I guess, how are you viewing this world title fight that we've got? One that I guess we were looking for, one that maybe we didn't think we were going to get this year, but I guess it's the one that we've got. Beggars can't be choosers, right?
Yeah, so first of all, this is the first time in a while I've been a neutral in a championship battle. Yeah. We haven't really had a championship battle in a few years anyway. You know, it's been a foregone conclusion that it's going to be Max. So it's refreshing to at least have one. And it's one that I don't really care. I don't really care which driver wins. So the thing that I'm looking for in eeach race is for whoever is further back in the championship to beat the other one so that the points stay tight. So we might have some needle, or, you know, if Piastri gets too far ahead, there's no chance of us having this kind of like controversy or like real, needle's a great word. Like, that's what I want. So anyway, so I'm just watching from the outside and enjoying that. But you're right, it's been a bit underwhelming so far. I'm kind of happy. This will come as no surprise to anyone. I'm kind of happy that Max isn't in contention. Like, you know, he's had his. I'm happy it seems like he's probably going to re-sign for Red Bull now, which I didn't think I was going to say about a week ago. And that means that, you know, hopefully that team is screwed for a while now if the Ford engine sucks and that kind of thing. So that's good. Yeah, that bit's good. But yeah, the championship fight is, man. I mean, at least it's happening. At least there is one. I can't tell you who's going to win. And I've seen a side of Norris I didn't think I'd see, as in a weaker side of Norris I didn't think existed.
What is that weaker side then that you'd say? Like, what is it in Norris that you've seen this year that you maybe haven't seen in other years, or is it something that you've seen before, which seems to be like maybe exacerbated in this world title fight?
I've seen him get inside his own head more than I thought he would. Yeah. I know he's always been, an emotionally open driver, and wears his heart on his sleeve, and he's not really afraid to let people know. He's not trying to hide behind a persona or a brave inverted commas front. But yeah, I've seen him, although he's come back from each one, I've seen him just not be as. First of all, I thought he'd have the legs on Piastri. From what I'd seen in the previous seasons, I thought he would just have that pace edge, which would then make the rest easy. And that hasn't been the case. Piastri's just been stronger compared to him than I expected. And then, Norris has kind of almost let pressure situations sometimes get to him, but not always. It's like sometimes he can cope with it and sometimes he can't. But so far, it's trending Piastri's way, isn't it?
It is. And I think, for me, there's a couple of things on that. I think Oscar's progress from last season to this season, I don't think anyone envisaged him kind of that, his development has been, whilst it was on an upward kind of curve, it's exponentially gone extremely higher in terms of his racecraft, especially the tyre wear issue. We're looking at him in the race weekend this week. He's on the medium tyre. You'd think that tyre would degrade more than the hard tyre, although the hard tyre obviously was 2 steps down, I think. And I think it was like the C1, wasn't it? So, the hard tyre was 2 steps down, and, of course, it wouldn't be as fast. But we saw with his lap times at the end of that race, he had pace in hand, really, at the end of that race. Maybe something that he wouldn't have had last season. His qualifying, seems to have come on leaps and bounds as well. We're looking at someone last year who was dunked on in qualifying, now regularly out qualifying Lando Norris. So, although he obviously lost out on pole on Saturday, but I think that side's been a surprise. I think for me, what I would say about Lando is I have noticed a difference in his media. I guess post-Canada, I would say his media, when things go wrong, he's very much trying to deflect and just being like, it wasn't good enough, hands up, we'll go again tomorrow. And instead of the beating up on himself that we've seen. So I think he probably has acknowledged that he was too much in his head. I am seeing a lot more media trained answers from him now, whether that's, he's got someone in, or maybe that, that's just him. But I guess hopefully that minimizes, because we need a Lando Norris who's confident in himself. Otherwise, Piastri's 16 points ahead. If he wins in Hungary, that's pretty much, we're at a race win, basically, that Lando Norris would need to take the lead. So it's important that Lando does keep his head going forward, I guess, right?
Yeah, and in my view, he's lucky to be as close as he is with with the Silverstone win, for example. Norris didn't go and win that. That happened because Piastri. You could argue either way, but Piastri got a penalty, whether or not you agree with the penalty. But that wasn't Norris went and took that win and overtook Piastri and made it his. That was given to him to a certain extent. So it could be a bigger gap, and I think. I saw in previous seasons, certainly in Norris's championship run-in last year, as far away as he was, there was the mathematical chance for quite a while. Yeah. And McLaren were on the up whilst Red Bull were on the down. And there were those moments from Piastri where he showed this killer instinct that we've seen a few times.
Yeah, like Monza, for example.
Like Monza being the key one, where he clearly didn't care about Norris's championship, and he was aggressive and very controlled and went and took a win. And that kind of thing, I always thought, okay, that's great. That'll be brilliant in a title fight if you've got the pace to then back it up. And like you say, his development over the winter, he now seems to also have the pace. And it's almost like Mark Webber's had a word with him and said that this might not come around again. This might be the chance. So you can't have another bedding in year. Like, you actually need to just go do it now. And it's whatever he's doing is clearly working. Because I would have rated Norris as very, very difficult to beat as a teammate until this year. And so... Anyway, I think you giving him the 16-point lead, barring any failures or accidents, that kind of thing, just in pure performance terms, Piastri's potentially going to be able to keep him at arm's length. And it's hard to, when you've got that points advantage, same as, without wanting to bring up the infamous season, same as when Lewis was chasing Max for the title in terms of points a couple of years ago. If you're the car in front and you've got more points, then you can afford for both cars to not finish. And that's the position that Piastri could find himself in. It's hard to get past if the car in front knows if you both don't finish that they win. So anyway, this might be what happens.
No.
So let's see. There's enough races left that it can all change around.
There is enough races left, isn't there? I think, look, this was race 13, right? So, we've still got another 11 races, I want to say. And, anything can happen. Reliability, first corner incident. I was actually about to say, could be a rainy race and a pile-up. What are your thoughts on the FIA and their handling of the wet weather? I think it's kind of been split. I think there's definitely, if there's one thing that will show like a generational divide in people who watch Formula One, it's their reaction to wet weather races and I guess what they deem is acceptable. And look, just to say, the FIA, the reason why they were more cautious this week is because at Silverstone, they basically were told by the drivers, this was, you started the race too early, or the conditions you started the race in were dangerous. Look how Isaac Hadjar went into the back of, I can't remember who he went into the back of. But he crashed into the back of someone, maybe Tsunoda, I can't remember. But he crashed into the back of someone he couldn't see. The spray was everywhere. And so they said, you need to be more cautious. This week, it feels like they've gone too cautious. But then if you look at, look at the drivers, pretty much all the drivers other than Hamilton and Verstappen were saying that we need, this race can't go. A lot of people online are saying, look, we've seen what happens in wet races. We've seen what happens in Eau Rouge in the wet. So I guess for you, where do you sit on, I guess, how wet races are managed in general in Formula 1? Because they really have sanitized it. Like, personally, they really kind of sanitized wet races. And I think taking away what is a pretty crucial element of the sport.
Yeah, so when you say there's a generational divide, so obviously I'm from a generation, I think you and I are similar in age.
Yeah.
You're quite young though, but I come from an era where they just got on with it, and it'd be quite easy to say, just right, they're supposed to be the best drivers in the world, let them all that stuff. But I'm also at an age where I appreciate risk, as in I appreciate how much risk there is, rather than I don't like it, is what I'm saying. And I've also had a lot of years of racing in that kind of condition in places not too far away. I did a lot of racing at the Nürburgring, and that's very, very close to Spa. It's like an hour away, very similar weather patterns. And I've raced there in closed wheel cars that still produce a lot of spray. It's much worse in a Formula One car with the sheer amount of water they throw into the sky, especially with no covers on the wheels. But even in what I've raced at, considerably lower speeds and with the protection of a cockpit around me, like a windscreen at least, it's terrifyingly dangerous when you just can't see what's in front of you. And there's a big element of just hoping that there isn't a stationary object or a person climbing out of their wreckage or whatever it is in the spray in front of you. And I think it's one thing saying it's wet, but the drivers are good, so they should be able to control the cars. But it's the visibility thing is the argument that I do tend to agree with. If you can't see what's in between you and the other cars, if there's spray that is just an opaque wall, it is purely down to luck. It's not about who's the best driver. It's down to luck and who cares the least about the risk. And that I don't really care about watching that. That's just like, we might as well roll the dice and then see who wins. Yeah. If they can see where they're going and it's just really slippery, that's completely different. But that isn't the problem, and that's not why they didn't start this race. This is, they're on intermediates behind the safety cars, so it's not like it was too wet to drive. It's that it was too wet to see, and this is a bit of a perpetual problem at Spa. And I think we're just in a bit of in between a rock and a hard place here. I'm not a big defender of the FIA in most situations. I don't think there was a whole lot more they could have done. Although I do also appreciate that certain drivers were saying we should just carried on and we should have got on with it. So there is that perspective. If some of the drivers, and Max being the most vocal one, if they're saying it was fine, we should just get on and race, that is also a perspective. But I think everyone has to sign up to the same thing. And with the greatest respect, Max also isn't the furthest back in the pack looking through the most spray. And Spa is clearly an emotional place to have this conversation because of the incidents that have happened.
Yeah.
And there's even been, plenty of incidents at that same spot on the track that haven't involved fatalities but have caused massive injuries. We don't talk about, is it Correa that had, his terrible leg injuries, that he nearly didn't recover fully from. And there's loads, and it's all because of running in wet weather at that track. And so, that's my perspective. I want them. I'm sat there watching, going, "Come on, get on with it." But at the same time, I totally understand why they wouldn't. And the race director, at the end of the day, is like the buck stops with them.
Yeah.
And if something was to happen, they've got to live with it. And so, I think if you can't see my normal, here's just a final way of looking at it. I've worked at a lot of racetracks over the years, and normally what will red flag a session is when marshals can't see the next marshal post. So if you're at marshal post 1 and you can't see marshal post 2, you can't communicate safely between them, and that stops the event normally, because the drivers also then can't see the next marshal post. So how can you tell if there's yellow flags or red flag even, you'll still be going flat out and not realise. So I think that's probably a legitimate reason for stopping. It's frustrating. We want to watch a race. It's Sunday afternoon. We've waited, but that's just how it is. So.
No, fair play. And I think, I'll give you a little round, because I think that was very well put. Oh, sorry. That's the wrong applause. Cheering. Yeah. The other one sounded like...
I thought they were both fine. If anyone wants to see some, historical, horrendous wet weather visibility issues at Spa, which didn't have horrible consequences, but you can see how they very nearly did. Dino Zamparelli in Formula 2 from about 2012 or 13. If you just search on YouTube, Zamparelli Spa near miss or something like that, it's a almost stationary car appears from nowhere whilst this guy's going 180 miles an hour. Could have been a monumental, horrible crash with, people might not have survived. So that can happen. That's in Formula 2, and that's the old Formula 2 that was slower. So you can just imagine, and we kind of don't want to see more of that kind of
even
thing.
The big, what was it, 98, 99 pile up on the old
that was just out of La Source. That was a much lower speed.
Much slower, exactly. So there's all kinds of examples. I think Spa is what they say, because the rain hangs in the air a bit, and it kind of, it's maybe something different to maybe, if you look at how Australia was run, for example, and even though there was war on the track and it was wet and there was spray, they were able to kind of do that race in a much better way at the time than they were with Spa.
I think Spa is very high speed is one. So you've got blind, super high speed corners, and like you say, track objects like forest either side of the circuit, high, tall pine trees, for example, or fir trees or whatever, that keep the spray stuck. It can't disperse as easily. So somewhere like Australia, okay, they're still going very fast. It's a Formula 1 track, but the speeds are lower, and you can see objects at the side. It's easier to see stuff. It's all there, whereas Spa is a murky... It's very similar to the Nürburgring. It's a murky forest at super high speeds. So there we go.
Look, and respect to everyone who goes to Spa and sits through every year, like knowing you're going to get shat on and still going. Like, that's real motor racing, like, fans. Like, that's not Vegas. That's not Monaco. Like, that is probably, that is a pure racing fans kind of place to go with all the camping and stuff there. So respect to all the Spa fans. Not for me. And I still want it off the calendar. Anyway, so Lando Norris, quickly, before we move on, how do you view, there was a lot of talk around, Lando making mistakes, right? I guess we're talking about this kind of development of Lando. I think people, if they're talking about making mistakes, obviously first corner, after the safety car restart, it gets a little bit sideways coming out of the first corner. I think Ann Davidson says he's kind of looking in his mirrors, taking a tighter line because he's trying to cover off maybe a potential overtake from Piastri, and then obviously he's on a bad line and whatever. And then obviously as he's trying to catch Piastri, I think a few times where he locks his tyres, not too dissimilar from, I think, when Lewis was trying to chase down George Russell last year. And you see someone who's trying to put in qualifying lap after qualifying lap after qualifying lap on tyres which are clearly, starting to have enough, you are going to get lockups and so. But I guess how do you rate? Do you? I mean, and also we don't know as well the battery issue. Although Lando says the battery issue wasn't something that he would attribute to losing his place, but Zach Brown said that it might have been. So I guess how much can you put on Lando Norris in terms of losing that position at the start and then not being able to get it back? Or is it just, as he said, the worst place to qualify in pole position, as evidenced by the sprint result and the main race result?
I don't feel that Norris made any single mistake which cost him the win. I think that I appreciate what you're saying about the safety car restart at the beginning.
Yeah.
But I also think that Piastri was going to just get him anyway. It's so hard to be the person that's in front. Like you can't really do anything right because whatever you do, the person behind has the benefit of just, having that enormous slipstream down the Kemmel Straight. So all Piastri had to do was just be behind Norris, and it didn't really matter what Norris did. There's no way he could have gone fast enough. I think that he could have got away or been far enough in front to avoid that overtake. Having said that, I think he did go quite early, didn't he? I think he started his restart quite early.
Yeah, it went really early.
Well, potentially, you could say that then meant that the Piastri was able to get closer earlier, and then Norris, like you say, went slightly defensive and then lost a bit of momentum on the. He certainly guaranteed he was going to be overtaken by doing those things, but I think he probably would have been anyway. A little bit like I felt it was inevitable that Max was going to be in the lead at the beginning of the sprint race, and then it just happened. It felt similar to that. The other mistakes, I think, once Norris was in second, he was just, especially after the pit stop where he delayed the stop and then there was a massive gap behind, pushing super hard on tyres that aren't actually as quick, and he was just making mistakes that you'd make when you're in slightly tricky conditions. I know it's dry line, but it's not like it's the perfect conditions. Are still damp in places. I think they were just. I didn't think there was anything there that was heinous or pointed towards him losing his head or anything like that. It was just once he'd lost the lead at the start, it was kind of done. I think. So that was what from watching it in a hotel bar at the XL Centre on my phone, trying to hear the commentary. That's how it felt.
I wouldn't characterize it as anything else other than that, to be honest. Like from what I could see, I think sometimes, I'm not going to lie, and look, there are some people, for the things that he's said and the things that he's done, I know there are some people that are absolutely reveling in any time Lando Norris fails or doesn't do well. Like, and I get it. Like, that's why we all have people that that we hate. We do a whole channel of it. But I think this weekend, obviously sprint qualifying, that 6/10 to Piastri is a big gap. But I think, from Saturday to Sunday, I actually don't think Lando Norris did a great deal wrong. It's just that the margins are so fine at the moment between the two of them. It does mean that, you can go in, your teammate can pit from less than a second in front of you or just over a second in front of you, but then you come out of the pits, with the undercut and a slow pit stop, and now you're on hard tyres, you're 9 seconds behind, and it's like, oh well, now I've really got to, what really can you do from there, from the position of a rolling start in the rain? You're first to the first corner, you're first to all the corners really at any kind of racing speed. I just think it was an unfortunate day. Rather, I wouldn't put this in like the Norris bottling category. It feels unlucky, but like I said, those are the breaks and those are the fine margins when you're fighting for a championship. And people who make fun of those who have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, should be 8. But it's very easy to look from the sidelines and look at someone racking up championships, especially ones against their teammate, and think it's all well and good, it's all easy. But you've got to manage those fine margins every weekend, I guess.
I hope Norris. I hope Norris has an appreciation. You know, I know that was an isolated comment a few years ago that he made. A little bit of a slight at Lewis. I hope if he doesn't already feel and realise this, I hope this season has been a little bit of a wake up call. Is not quite the right phrase, but I hope he understands maybe it's not quite so easy anymore. Yeah, reality check. I think Norris needs to be careful to avoid slipping into a David Coulthard versus Mika Hakkinen role for the older of your listeners, because they were often pretty close, and you'd go through a season where either of them could be the one that was actually in front, but it was always Hakkinen who ended up taking the championship. Coulthard wasn't ever in that position, and you don't want to be that. It doesn't take long before you're in that role. And at the moment, if Piastri's behind Norris, I think a lot of us would feel given a sniff he's coming through. Yeah. And I don't necessarily feel that way about it the other way around. So
no.
Norris needs to put that right if he wants to win. I'd quite like Norris to win the championship because he's been there longer, and Piastri, I think, will have more opportunities. Yeah. But yeah, who knows how it's going to go.
It's not up to whether I want it, whether you want it, whether anyone wants it, right? The universe doesn't give a crap about us.
No, I don't want it that much. I don't care that much. It's just like, on balance, it would be nice, because I feel like he might not have another chance. Whereas Piastri is like killer. I feel like he's gonna grind it out and make it happen.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, look, I guess if there was one person that we would want to win the title, it would be Lewis Hamilton. That's not going to happen this season. What a weekend for me to come back to F1 Twitter. I must say, I feel like people were so excited to have me back just so that they could say the same things that they always say every time Lewis doesn't do something well, which is he's washed, he's finished. And the thing that kind of drew that initial comment, I guess, is Friday. So let's go through Friday. So I think Saturday, you track limits, it can happen to anyone. It's unfortunate, but, it is what it is. Friday. So Lewis, obviously, first run, I think he's affected by Antonelli spinning on his lap, and that kind of wrecks that lap. So he's got no banker lap, and then obviously we're going into second lap. It's a long track, so you can't do 3 runs pretty much by the time you go around, come back in. Lewis spins at the final chicane, formerly known as the bus stop chicane. I can't remember what it's called now. But an unusual spin. He literally 360s. Well, not 360s, 180s. And it comes out that this was due to rear locking. Now, this has also been attributed potentially to change brake pads, or a potential change in some kind of setup piece which he hadn't had before, meaning that he wasn't used to it, and this was the first time, or these were the first times running it in anger, and he kind of put his hands up and said, it's my fault. And Davidson and I think Jolyon Palmer were both kind of like, rear locking, that's got to be something on the car or whatever. So I guess, Brad, as someone who's probably got a lot more knowledge on stuff like this than I do, first off, can you just explain, and maybe for those who don't know, what exactly is rear locking, and why is it, I guess, so much worse than front brake locking?
Okay, so first of all, I have to say, I'm looking forward to talking to you about this way more than I should. Like, this is... the moment you mentioned this, I was like, I've really been waiting to talk to someone about this exact thing. I'm not joking. Okay. I'm a massive nerd. Okay, so for context, in my many roles over my life, one of the things that I was British Formula 3 test driver. So I was like one of the test drivers for the series. Me and Jolyon Palmer were basically sharing the duties. And so I've driven single-seaters quite a lot, even though I haven't got like a single-seater career. Like a Pedro de la Rosa, but obviously at a much lower level. So anyway, I'm very, very au fait with the feeling of front to rear locking and adjusting brake bias and the way it transitions and the way it feels. So in short, rear locking is when the rear wheels lock before the front wheels. So generally you'll have a brake bias split where there's more braking happening on the front axle than the rear, because when you brake, weight transfers to the front, and therefore the front tyres are the ones that need to provide more of the deceleration, and the weight transfers to them, and that's where the grip is to a slightly higher degree. The stiffer the car, the less weight transfer there is. So obviously a Formula One car, very, very stiff, especially modern ones. So you have much closer to a 50-50 front to rear split than you would in any other series. A touring car might be something like 65 at the front percent, but but it varies. And the more rear grip you've got, the more you would wind the bias backwards, and the more you're trying to avoid front locking, the more you would wind the bias backwards. But there comes a point where when you're braking at maximum braking force, somewhere in your bias setting at a certain percentage, you'll switch from the front tyres locking up first to the rear tyres locking up first. Right. And in any car, you would never want it that the rear tyres locked up first, because that will send you into a big oversteer moment, whereas the front tyres locking up first, when a front tyre locks up first, you've seen it 1,000 times on Formula One. It's very, very obvious and visual, but what happens is you run very slightly wide, and the earlier you can recognise you've locked a front tyre, the earlier you can reduce a bit of brake pressure and save it and carry on. But what doesn't tend to happen with front locking, unless it's a severe moment and something dramatic has happened, you don't tend to spin or go off. You'll be slightly slower than you would have been if you hadn't locked. But rear locking involves a snap. So what you want to do, your target as a driver, is to set the bias so that at maximum braking force, at peak braking force, such as when Hamilton's braking for the final chicane / 2 hairpins at Spa, the front tyres lock up just before the rears would have locked up. And that way you're getting maximum deceleration, because the rear is doing as much as it can without locking before the fronts. So hopefully that makes sense as a concept. What you don't want is the front to be doing all the braking, and that means when you brake hard, the fronts just lock up really easily. And you don't want the rears to be doing all the braking, because it would be like pulling the handbrake on in a car, which would be very, very difficult.
No one wants that.
So generally, drivers have set that quite accurately, and they won't ever have a moment like Hamilton encountered. And I was fully on board with Anthony Davidson. I haven't heard Jolyon Palmer, but I generally go, generally I'm in agreement with him on his views on this kind of thing. And when Anthony Davidson was like, well, that isn't Lewis's fault, unless he's just wound the brake bias rearward for no reason. So I was with him, and I fully expected Lewis to allude to something like that when I saw the interview. So I was waiting for the interview. Lewis comes on and is basically accepting blame, saying, yeah, it's my fault. That's never happened to me before. But what he didn't say was, he didn't even say, I made a mistake with the bias. He was treating it like he'd made a driving error. Yeah. And just for the listeners' benefit, I'm sorry if this is obvious, but there is nothing you can do as a driver that just makes the rears lock up. It's not a mistake you can make. You can't brake too hard in a straight line and make the rears lock up unless you've set the bias too far rearward, or unless there's a car problem, like there's some braking issue which causes too much brake to go to one of the rear wheels, or there is a brake-by-wire issue, because this is what complicates this. In a modern Formula One car, it's not simply a hydraulic switch that you're controlling.
Clamp onto the,
there's electronic braking happening with the motor generator unit. So the car is, to a certain degree, deciding how much of the braking is regen on the rear axle, for example. So it's a little bit complicated with this brake migration. But in short, because the driver has to know what's going on to a certain degree, in short, it is kind of like it would be in a more simple single-seater where you wind the bias forwards or backwards. So anyway, what I'm saying is, I couldn't fathom how it could possibly be a driver error, like Davidson, and Davidson was really surprised when he heard Lewis's reaction. Yeah. Because like me, he's sitting there thinking, when a car just swaps ends like that, the driver can't do anything about it. They can try and save it, but obviously it happened so dramatically, he couldn't save it. So we're nearly at the point now, which is, I think either Hamilton made a mistake with his brake bias, and that's the first time in the weekend that he achieved maximum braking force. It was on a crucial lap into the heaviest braking zone, very, very high speed to a very, very low speed corner. And he just judged it incorrectly, as in he'd gone a bit too risky with the rear bias, and it locked up when he didn't expect it to. But what I've heard, and I think what you were alluding to at the beginning, was that because they changed brake, there's a component in the brakes they changed. I don't know if I think it was actually disc material, rotor material.
Okay. Yeah.
That had a different it had a different reaction to what Lewis had been used to. And so probably at that peak force, that caused the rear to grab more than he was expecting. And therefore the bias that he'd set wasn't quite right for that. So it's not a typical driving error. It's a little bit like the brake magic switch error at Baku.
Yeah.
You know, that thing there, Lewis made an error because he's the one that flicked the switch by mistake. But it wasn't a driving error. He didn't just drive badly. And this is the same thing here. I think he braked expecting the car to do a certain thing, but the setting he was in meant the car did something unexpected and uncontrollable. Didn't happen again the rest of the weekend, did it? And no one said there was a car problem. So I think it was a misjudgment in terms of setting the bias for this particular brake material. And everything I've heard since then is that he's actually more happy with these brakes were created for his style and for him.
Yeah,
it's the first time he really used them in ultimate anger.
In anger, yeah.
So it might be a good thing. And it might be better that it happened then than it happened when he's, leading a race and has to brake super hard, for example. But there we go. Hopefully that's a long explanation, but hopefully that makes sense to people.
I think that makes sense to me. And I think sometimes as well in F1, we can get so caught up in it's his fault, right? And or not even just it's his fault. Like, we can be so binary sometimes of yes, no. Fault is 100% with one. Even when we talk about driving incidents, right? And we always seem to kind of fall on whether it's one person's fault or it's another person's fault. And I think what we have here is a myriad of issues, or not issues, or a myriad of circumstances, which, of which some of that would probably lay at Lewis's door, right? In terms of, we know that, I think every driver is always kind of tinkering with the bias, isn't it? Like, whilst they go around the track, they do tinker with the bias. So, compare like him. At the end of the day, he's the one who sets that. So there is some, I guess, blame to be put there. But I don't think I think when people put that in the realm of this shows that he is now a diminished force in Formula One, I just think that's not something where you can't look at that and really be like a motorsport fan and really look at the reasons behind it and everything. If you look at all of the stuff that we've discussed, I don't understand how you can be a motorsport fan, look at that, and then say, further proof that he's finished, especially, with what we saw after.
It's a bit like if you're driving on the road spiritedly and you're coming up to a roundabout and your passenger, as you're braking for the roundabout, your passenger just grabs the handbrake and pulls it up, and you then spin. That's the sensation, and that doesn't mean that you've driven it badly. The vehicle you're in has done a thing that you didn't expect because of a reason you didn't expect. But you're right. If Hamilton's the one ultimately choosing his brake bias, he will have gone through the practice session, because there's only one practice session before this, which also might have contributed to this.
Really
gone through that, adjusting it. So they'll start with a very, an accurately rough idea of what the percentage split should be. He'll then drive. He'll feel, okay, well, it still seems to be locking up the front right quite easily. I'll go one click back. Well, it's normally 0.5%, but I'm sure they can go in smaller increments. I'll go another click back. And you keep winding the bias backwards until the fronts aren't really locking, and you start feeling a little bit more like a slight
like
rear
a twitch.
Lock.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, I've gone too far, half a click further forward. But obviously that changes depending on tyre condition, because if you've worn out the front tyres, then you'll want to go further back, because that will affect which one locks first. If you've worn out the rear tyres, you go the other direction. So that's why it's changing all the time. But it's just a confluence of factors. Lewis choosing the setting will be one of those, but he'll now have a more accurate way of, he'll have a more accurate idea of how it's going to react. But it's not, when you're saying it's, this is another thing that shows that he can't cut it or whatever. That's very different. That isn't a mistake like this. It's a procedural error rather than a driving error. It's not like he floored the throttle on the exit of the first corner and couldn't control it and spun or something like that. That's a very different thing. It's not a reactions thing. Nobody could have saved that. You can't know it's going to happen until you're already backwards. It's like an instant. So
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. And look, it's not great. Like going out of qualifying in Q1 on Friday and Saturday is not great. It's not good. I don't think anyone's under the impression that it is good, especially Lewis Hamilton, who was as down as I have seen him over the course of this weekend until we got to Sunday afternoon. I guess what it did allow us for, or allow Lewis, was the opportunity to go into the pits, or to start the race from the pits, which, when there's a rolling start, really and truly was, what are you actually missing out on? You've already, and especially when everyone behind you does the same thing anyway. It allowed him to go into pits. They pretty much overhauled the car, made a wet weather setup. He got a 60 place penalty or whatever, which is farcical. But I guess I wanted to ask, watching Lewis come through the field, I am, how good was that? And I guess how difficult is that? And like how much they say like rain is the great equalizer, and you see people come alive in the rain. I guess some people, I can imagine some of them who deliberately watch this podcast just to hate on it. Hello, I'm back. You're welcome. There are people who may say, well, Lewis had his car set up for the where others didn't have that opportunity, so he's going to be in a much more advantageous position kind of coming through the field. But I guess how, as someone who, like I said, you've had to drive in those conditions, changeable conditions, which are sometimes the more difficult, slick, we saw these intermediate tyres absolutely not really stand up to the test of, the 10 or so laps that they were under. How good was that kind of recovery from 16th, 17th to 7th? Where did he finish?
Yeah, so first of all, I think it can be overhyped because, like you say, it wasn't pit lane to podium or something like that. It was not even quite the very back, up to near the back of the top 10 in a car much quicker than most of the cars in front that had been specifically set up for those conditions with a brand new engine, etc.
Yes.
However, you can't underestimate how hard it is to drive in those conditions. Just in general, I was very impressed with everyone. To be honest, I don't think there was a yellow flag for the whole race. It was like
no yellow flags.
Nobody put a foot wrong in changeable conditions at one of the trickiest tracks there is. So everybody did a great job.
No retirements either.
But the other thing I'd say is there were also drivers in fast cars that had a similar treatment to Lewis, Antonelli, Tsunoda, for example, who didn't manage to come through. Lewis also benefited from a great strategy call. Wow, Ferrari.
Yeah.
A great strategy call.
Wow.
To
Lewis,
go to slicks earliest. That worked, but that only worked because Lewis was able to drive a car on cold slicks on a damp track. So his confidence in being able to control that car and make the most of that, which didn't happen as well at Silverstone. When they went early to slicks at Silverstone, he went straight off, and actually there was an overcut for everyone else who stayed out one or two laps longer. So I was a bit worried when I saw him make that call. Yeah. But here it worked out. I think it was just a bit drier. It was more benefit to being on the slick than it was Silverstone, which is greasier for longer, wasn't it? But so anyway, he did a great job, is what I'm saying. But it wasn't quite that. I was still surprised he got driver of the day. I was pleased, and I thought it was a great drive, but it wasn't. He was kind of stuck when he got to Albon because all the things that made the first few laps brilliant made the rest of the race hard. That high downforce setup that worked really well when it was wetter, and the choice to go onto the slicks again helped by the high downforce setup. It meant he could switch them on quicker and had more grip. That's the thing you don't want when it's actually dry and you've got a car in front that's quick on the straight. So he understandably got stuck behind Albon. And I think we had this same Ferrari lift and coast order to prevent plank wear that we've seen before.
I think they were actually saying it was due to fuel. So
was it fuel?
I think
so they
underfueled.
So they thought it would stay wetter for longer then, essentially.
Yeah, essentially thought it would stay wetter for longer. Thought obviously there'll be safety car periods. Again, probably another reason why. Not another reason, but you can understand why. Again, you can understand why Max and Lewis wanted the race to go. They had basically gambled on these setups. Ollie Bearman had that setup. Of course, they would want to race in the conditions which they've set their car up for.
Again, so when we look at that conversation about starting or not starting in wet conditions, you have to look at those drivers' comments through that lens. Both of those drivers who were, advocating starting had a big advantage to be gained by it being wetter for the longest period possible. So even if they didn't necessarily believe what they were saying in terms of it's safe enough, they had ulterior motives there. So so what I'm saying about Hamilton's performance is, obviously I'm there rooting for him and very happy seeing him make progress. And some of those moves were not easy. That move was on Gasly. I know Gasly was struggling. That was such an unusual place around the edge where the kart track is. I don't know what the corner names are, but it's the right-hander as you go past the kart track.
Yeah.
Really, I like the assertiveness, and I like to see the confidence he's got, because
decisiveness, right? I think I read somewhere, you can say what you want about Lewis and the qualifying, maybe the raw pace has gone, but in terms of his wheel-to-wheel combat, I actually think he's always improving. I think some of the moves that he's pulled off, obviously we saw the move that he pulled off in Austria, I want to say, around the outside of someone. I can't remember who it was, but he went around the outside. But I think he won overtake of the month for last month. The moves like that, and obviously, the move that he made, moves that he made, 3 cars in 38 seconds or whatever. I think I never doubt that if he has to come through the field and he has the car able to do it, I don't doubt that he's able to do it.
I just want to be careful to not fall into the Lance Stroll trap. And I'm not saying this is Lewis, but Lance Stroll got lots of praise on other drivers for qualifying badly than overtaking cars that they definitely should have been overtaking. The caveat here is mixed conditions is not quite as easy as that. You've got wet offline. Now you're having to overtake on the more slippery bit because the car that you're overtaking is obviously staying on the grippy bit. So you're having to go off onto the disadvantageous bit of track and still make the move on tyres that are wearing out. So whatever advantages you attribute to Lewis's car, the way it was set up and everything at the beginning, he still had to make it work and not clatter into people. And it's hard to make progress like that. And, without DRS as well, because DRS isn't enabled at that point. So it's,
100%.
They were good moves, and I thought he drove a really strong race. And I like the stat that it's only him and Piastri that have scored in every race. He's clearly keeping it on the island and making few mistakes. And if he can just couple that with stringing together complete weekends that don't have, a silly track limits at the top of Eau Rouge or... Hang on, what's it called? Is it Radion?
Radion,
yeah, okay. But from the onboard, I still contest that you can't tell that was actually off track. I can't, you can't see that all those wheels were off. I hope the stewards had some very clear off-board footage because both of the angles we saw, there was zero conclusive evidence that he had all 4 wheels off. But anyway.
Yeah, you would hope that obviously they've got multiple, they say they've got multiple more angles. But
you just feel like if that was Red Bull, they'd have argued the case and anyway. But...
Anyway, well, look, maybe actually we'll get on to that shortly. Let's do our stars and donkeys, and then we can definitely get into what was some big news, which I've not been able to be on camera about, and I want to dance on somebody's grave. So, who was your star of the weekend? Let's do star of the weekend.
Okay. I don't know how popular this will be. Charles Leclerc for all the good things we're saying about Lewis. Charles is consistently getting the maximum out of that Ferrari and defending against Max and not letting him through in a car which looked like a bloody handful at times.
Yeah, and for sure.
Getting podiums frequently and just being the best of the rest. The McLarens are gone. But Charles was the best. And if Lewis had finished there, we'd be giving him massive praise. Yeah. So I think credit where it's due, Charles Leclerc is doing a great job in this car. And I'm so pleased that my 2 favourite drivers are the 2 in this team. So.
Yeah, no, look, I think him and George, I think George... Him and George, in different ways, have just kind of gone about their business, maybe slightly under the radar, and just, I guess, you don't want to praise them too much. I guess they're doing what, they're world-class drivers doing what they're supposed to do. I think that both of them have had weekends where they could have done more, especially you look at Charles in Canada, for example. Was it Canada or was it, was it Silverstone?
Silverstone was a nightmare for Leclerc.
Silverstone. Silverstone.
I think we rightly will have pointed that out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think, you kind of look at that, but, I think he definitely made up for it this weekend. And, he clearly didn't have the pace to keep Norris behind him in the sprint race. And I think this weekend, you always like him and Max is always like, you just know with Charles, like, I think there's an extra bit of like needle in there. Like he really does not want to bow to Max. And whenever they go wheel to wheel, it's always really fiercely contested. So no, I've got no issues with that as a star of the day, to be honest. If I was going to have a star of the weekend, it was hard to look past Oscar. Let me see who else. Belgian GP. I'm looking at, you know what? I'm gonna go with Alex Albon. I think that Alex Albon would have gone into this season, and I think I probably said something to this effect, and probably wasn't the only one, that his career was on the line this season. Williams have done everything in their power, quite publicly, to get Carlos Sainz into that car. And you'd be forgiven for thinking that Alex Albon was there to play second fiddle to Carlos Sainz, given Carlos Sainz's pedigree at Ferrari and, even at McLaren and so forth. And, given Alex's relative lack of success at Red Bull and obviously building it back up at Williams. But I just think this season he's consistently, again, kind of just gone and done his job. And it's made Carlos... You feel for Carlos Sainz, but you feel for him in a way that, you can quickly go from the hottest property on the market to a forgotten man. And the more that this relationship, or not relationship, but the more that this kind of balance of power in Williams kind of swings towards Albon, you do worry about someone that probably realistically was looking at this as like a stepping stone or a halfway house before they went somewhere bigger. But in F1, opportunity can pass you by quite quickly. And you look at Sauber now and you think, oof, would it have been such a bad idea to take the bag at Audi and at least see what work, driving for a works team would be like? So I don't know. How do you see that situation?
Yeah, I agree. I was surprised to see this season just how well Albon's done against Sainz. I know he's the incumbent, and I know there's value to that, but I think Sainz has had some problems. I don't think it's all been
for sure. It's been unlucky.
To him. He's had some car issues, but
for sure.
Albon has definitely been more regularly the top guy there. So I'm surprised by it. I'm not Albon's biggest fan. I'm also not against Albon at all. He's not someone that I'm like backing. So I'm just watching as a kind of neutral in the background. I definitely didn't have a favourite between Sainz and Albon. Whatever happens, a little bit like the McLaren drivers. But I think there's a few. I don't know whether we can say it's better that he's gone there than Audi until we see what Williams and Audi cook up next year, because obviously so much of this year's driver market is kind of geared towards what happens next. Another reason why it's so crucial that either Norris or Piastri wins the championship this year, because there's no guarantee they're going to have a car to do it in the next 5 years or whenever. But so I'm with you on Sainz, but I think there's quite a few. You could pick out donkeys quite easily here. There's a few people having a bad time at the moment.
Who would you choose as your donkey?
So this is with no ill will towards this driver because I think he's good and really nice, but Kimi Antonelli's being absolutely smashed by George Russell at the moment, and this weekend's the first time I've seen signs of him being affected by it. There's like emotional paddock scenes, and I almost feel like, until I heard very recently that it's much more likely Verstappen staying at Red Bull, I thought this was partly connected to him seeing his drive slipping away. because it went from maybe being Verstappen and Antonelli at Mercedes next year to Verstappen and Russell because of Antonelli just not being close enough. But now it might just genuinely be that he's just disappointed in his performance. Maybe he knows he's going to be there the next year or two, and it's just that he's not happy with being that far off. I think it can turn around, and I think there's loads of drivers who... I can't remember a season in my F1 following life where you've had drivers in top teams near the front and their teammates often outside the top 10 for various reasons. But you had Antonelli and Tsunoda, and although actually I don't know, maybe Tsunoda got a point this week. No, I don't think he did. I'm not sure. But regularly, Max is making the Red Bull look like a front runner, and Tsunoda is making it look like a average to slow midfielder. And that's similar to Antonelli sometimes. It has been true of Hamilton given certain circumstances occasionally, but he seems to then drag it forward, and it's normally circumstance rather than pace that's the problem there. But yeah, it's been strange seeing such a split. Sainz is an example too. Albon clearly in the top 10, and then Sainz not there. So anyway, yeah, that's why I say it's easy to pick out a couple of donkeys. Gasly and Colapinto, for example, again, it's another big split between the teammates. And I think it partly shows how close the cars are. I think it shows how small things can change how well you get on with a car, and whether you can extract the last couple of tenths or not. And I think there are drivers that are in that bottom split versus their teammates that might not be in a different era. And I don't mean in terms of a different era of drivers. I mean in a different kind of car. So maybe next year that changes. I think different people's styles suit different cars, and this is a very specific kind of car. There we go.
Yeah. No, I think
have I told you my donkey?
Look,
yeah, Antonelli. Yeah, Antonelli was my donkey.
Yeah, look.
Any of those others.
He's probably mine as well. I think, look, you look at... George Russell made a really good point. He said, I think in Canada... he was, 4 tenths off me, and he qualifies in fourth. And I'm first, he's fourth. And today he's 3 tenths off me, but that means he's out in Q1. And I think that's the car has gone backwards, and then your perception of how this driver is doing is completely different to he's 4 or 5 tenths off his teammate. But he's fourth. What a result for an 18-year-old to, he's 3 tenths off, but he's out in Q1. And it's a completely different perception. And how far
what did we say Norris's gap was to Piastri in the sprint qualifying? Like 6 tenths or something, wasn't it?
6 tenths, yeah.
And this is often the case with the top cars. I mean, if you look at, I'm sure if we were to go all the way back to the ancient times of Rosberg, Hamilton in 2016, you'll have loads of races where if it was this year, Rosberg would be qualifying down in 18th in terms of the gap.
Yeah.
But because the Mercedes is so far in front, and same with Bottas, you can afford to qualify X number of tenths behind your teammate, and you're still picking up 18 points at the end of the race. So then you're kind of in contention. So you've got to just remember those kind of things and make sure you try and put things in perspective. But in the season we've got, where it is super close, there are some drivers who are regularly not being that gap behind. They're the ones at the front of their team, and therefore getting the results. And there seems to be a pattern of the ones who aren't. So that's really the only lens. It's the same difficulty and tightness for everyone, aside from those McLarens if they are a gap ahead. But you get my point.
For sure. But I think it's really creating like a really cool midfield battle. We've got Saubers popping into the top 10, Haas, Albon or Gasly, in the Alpine, the 2 Williams, whereas before, maybe last season, you were looking at a top 8 that was pretty much decided, and then anything, it was 9th and 10th, and then, you were looking for kind of scraps on that, pretty much we're looking at from 5th, 6th to 10th.
You're not surprised to see Hajar in the top 5, for example. It can happen regularly.
You really don't know what's going to happen once you get past Verstappen and the 2 McLarens, Charles, Lewis to an extent, but you're not really sure what's going to happen once you get past, and then I guess Russell. But then again, we're having situations where Russell's going out in Q2, and Lewis isn't making it into Q1 and into Q2 and all of those things. So for those who love the midfield battle, it is very keenly contested. Okay. Oh, quickly. Okay, do you want to read these with me? You read these with me, mate? I can send you a link. Go on. And then you can read your favourite Driver of the Day tweets. Thank you everyone for sending us your Driver of the Day, Donkey of the Day tweets.
Where do I find these?
They're in the chat. I've just sent them.
Yeah, sorry, the chat here. I straight away went to WhatsApp and I was like, I can't see them.
They're in the studio chat. Right. I'm going to go with Nilly Vanilli F1, whose birthday it was the other day. Happy birthday, Nilly. Star of the weekend, or star of the day, Lewis. Donkey of the Day, Ferrari lack of common sense, and I'm presuming that is the fuel and lift and coast. Look, sometimes you gotta, if you're not cheating, you're not trying, in the words of Martin Brundle. And also happy that we're finally back. Also, GP has been missing the last 2 races for personal reasons. Can we get him to replace Adami? Asking for a friend. Well, he would not be the only red. Yeah, he has not been around. He's not been. Adami.
I mean, I've got a lot I can say about that. I don't know. Maybe there's like a whole context of a relationship there behind the scenes, and maybe this is just maybe Lewis actually is fine with it, and this is how he wants it. But man, it doesn't come across well, does it? Like, no, I want to sit that guy down and say, right, let's just review your radio messages. How could these have been more? Not positive necessarily, but how could they have been more helpful or constructive? Yeah. Because I can think of loads of ways. So, like, it shouldn't need your driver. Sorry, I'm going off the rails here when you're trying to read.
No, that's fine.
It shouldn't be down to your driver to go, is everything okay? Like, you should have already told him. You should have already said, okay, Lewis, I'm sorry, mate. We've got track limits to the top of the hill. Don't worry about it. Like, part of the skill of an engineer like that is not nannying or mollycoddling the driver. It's understanding what helps get the best out of them. And like, I haven't been Lewis's race engineer, but I've watched enough Formula One and TV to know that Lewis likes a bit of an arm around him at times, and might need a bit of a positive pep talk. Like, it worked with Bono. Like, this is just basically just be slightly nice. Like, don't be a frosty. Like, I nearly swore. I'm not allowed to swear on your podcast, but you
can swear as much as you want. Yeah.
Like, just be kind of human to the guy. Like, sort of track limits. Like, okay, what's the context? What, like, does that mean I'm out then? Like, you shouldn't need the driver to keep asking questions. Your job as an engineer is to provide the information in a way that means the driver doesn't need to ask questions. Like, man, like, grr, I don't like him. Anyway, right, so I should find a tweet here. Haven't been on Twitter in a while, ever since it was like ultimately clear that Musk was a super fascist and in bed with all those dudes. I've been off of it, so you won't have seen many tweets from me. But
no, that's fine.
Star of the day, Ryan Marsh says, this is Darth Ryan 87. Quick stop for coming back. Donkey of the day. FIA for taking an age to get started. We've discussed that. I do think there's definitely scope for the FIA to have started the restart procedure quicker. You know, it's sunny for ages. You can see what's happening with the weather. You can see the clouds have gone. Get it going sooner, but that's different to getting started when it's too wet. And our talking point, starting second is better than getting pole. Yeah, I think that's just Spa, isn't it? I think
that is Spa.
I think if we looked at the history of the last few years, generally the person starting not on pole, if you start on pole, you're not in front by the time you get to at the end of the Kemmel Straight. So, yeah, there we go.
I'm actually going to go with there was a tweet. I want to, because I got stick for talking about this yesterday, so we'll get into it. Alex Albon Defense Unit, Jeff 1, start of the day, Alex Albon, Donkey is teammate. Talking about it, does Spa really just have hype moments and aura? I am not going to lie to you. There are certain circuits on the calendar that I think I wouldn't bemoan their absence if they left. And I know Spa is alternating now with Zandvoort. I cannot remember the last good race at Spa. I think sometimes we have circuits where the cars, and look, this might be completely different the next time we go there in 27 with the new regulations. So maybe I was slightly harsh, but I think there's tracks where we have gone past. The sport has moved past those tracks. I think Spa, as wonderful a circuit is and as much heritage as it has, and wow, this fucking track is so good with the Porsche supercars, and wow, this track is so good with whatever other racing series, Le Mans, whatever, like, endurance championships. I get it. I'm saying for Formula One, I think the same way we have with Monaco, the same way we have with Imola, I think the same way we have with certain temporary circuits we go to, which I can't understand for the reason, Singapore, fucking Miami, for fuck's sake. Like, I think there's certain circuits where it just doesn't suit F1 racing. And I think some circuits are there of fucking the past and heritage. And I think that sometimes we mollycoddle certain tracks and we allow for what is ostensibly a piss poor product at these races to have a sprint race and a main race, even in changeable conditions, where as soon as it went dry, there was no overtaking. It was a procession. And even when you have changeable conditions, it's one of those tracks where it's not like Silverstone, where you can go offline and you can, there's different lines you can take, Zandvoort even, different lines you can take, and that enables overtaking. Once that dry line is set up, that is it. And I just think, if they took it away forever, I would be happy. That obviously drew the ire of a lot of people on Twitter. Not my first time, won't be my last. So, Brad, am I being a dickhead? Am I being an idiot? Or what are your thoughts on Spa as a circuit for F1? I guess in its current guise, and I guess looking forward to what 26 forward may bring.
Yeah, so the caveat is it might be different with the new cars. There's so many things that could be different with the new cars. So we kind of have to wait and see with that. I think a lot of tracks have been outgrown by modern F1 cars, partly just because of the sheer size of the cars. Like they are stupidly big. And so tracks that traditionally were quite wide and you could fit F1 cars on easily. Think of 3 wide Zonta. Again, I'm showing my age here, but Schumacher, Hakkinen going round Zonta when they're coming straight, like they could easily fit. That you'd struggle to do that now because they're so blooming wide. But I think there are a couple of tweaks that you could quite easily make to Spa. I don't think it needs to be thrown out just yet. So a lot of the tracks that don't work very well for modern F1, Imola being a real key, they don't have long enough straights and they are fundamentally too narrow for overtaking to happen. And there's nothing you can really do about Imola. It is what it is. You're confined by the space. Spa, interestingly, because it used to be this super crazy large track, and even now as its modern F1 track version is still the biggest one, it happens to have massively long straights, which is what you tend to need in modern F1 in order to get some overtaking. Because they're not great at overtaking through corners, we could discuss that for hours. What tends to work is Baku-style massive straights where you can get a long drag up behind someone and either via DRS or otherwise get past. Now, I think a lot of the drivers noticed and mentioned, and I certainly noticed, that the DRS zone after Eau Rouge wasn't early enough this year. It wasn't effective enough. That's a very easy tweak. You can easily tweak that. And I'm sure there are other small tweaks, maybe widening the entry to the bus stop chicane final corner section, for example. Things like that could relatively easily make this change from this circuit's crap for modern F1 to actually it's one of the good classic circuits. Silverstone proves that you can have an older track that still works for modern F1. It doesn't have to be a Tilkedrome, built somewhere else. It can, with the right changes, you can adapt these circuits to make them work. Spa is obviously constrained by its elevation change and the fact it's built into the mountain range, etc. But I don't think it's dead and buried just yet in the way that I think somewhere like Imola is, or other circuits. I mean, we're about to go to Hungary, for goodness sake. Let's see what happens at Hungary next week. But yeah, so I love Spa. It was before I really knew F1 tracks. When I was a little tiny kid and I was playing some of the early F1 games. Spa was a track that stood out to me before I knew what Spa was. Yeah, and I've always enjoyed watching the races here. And there's a lot of history and a lot of nostalgia tied to it. But I'm not against getting rid of something if it really doesn't work. Maybe let's wait. Is it actually on the calendar next year, or is it the first year?
I think it's alternating. Yeah.
So we need to wait another year to see what the new cars are like, and maybe the new cars wreck everything anyway. Maybe everything sucks with the new cars. We just don't know.
Yeah.
But at least they're very slightly smaller, and they're going to be fundamentally different, less ground effect, etc. So let's just wait a minute, hold fire.
Let's wait and see,
and then see. But I don't think you're being stupid or a dickhead, like you said. I think your points are valid, and it's not been great.
It's not been great for a while, but you're right. Let's see what happens next year. But we can't hide behind heritage forever, guys. I'm sorry. Like, some of you guys are too scared to change. You guys don't even like when the F1 theme tune changes. You know, relax. Someone who didn't hold fire was Red Bull. Round of applause to these guys, by the way. Oh, finally. Only a year and a half too late. Oh my God. There have been pictures flowing on the internet since February 2024 of Christian Horner's nipples. Christian Horner singing songs to his PA, begging his PA to come to his hotel room. Clearly an abuse of power. People within the team leaving an absolute brain drain. Red Bull have lost several of their best eaters. That's how much of a brain drain there has been since Christian Horner's shit came out and beforehand. Max Verstappen was practically begging for Christian Horner to go. Even as much as he wanted to be quiet when he got moved to by Rosberg on the grid. He didn't want to talk about it, but we all know that he was instrumental. Verstappen couldn't even muster a semblance of fucking emotion to revere his boss, the guy who gave him a chance, the guy who elevated him into that seat, the guy who's managed every single one of his race wins. The coldness of Verstappen's responses in the media this week were telling. Red Bull got rid of Christian Horner a few weeks ago. This was the first weekend without him. Lauren Mekis, I want to say. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Apologies if I'm not. Thank you. But, yeah. Ding dong. He's gone. Thank God. I find it hilarious. It's so funny as well because so many people were defending his right to stay there for so long, and then Red Bull were just like bang. And I think for him, you know what is so juicy and delicious about this? And forgive me, for having this, but for someone who is so worried about their public perception in controlling the narrative, controlling the media, controlling everything. He dragged poor Jerry Horner, dragged through the Bahrain paddock by the hand in a show of marriage solidarity in the most PR created ridiculous imagery we had to see after he got caught sexting his PA against her will. Something which they're going to court for still, by the way. For him to not have, they're not firing him at the end of the season. It's not a world tour for Christian Horner. He's not gonna have the Christian Horner goodbye special, the end in Abu Dhabi with a montage of all of his best moments. He got kicked out, moved on. All we've got about his exit is some grainy phone footage from his last speech in Milton Keynes, and that's it. And I think what a way to go for F1's biggest camera-loving TP I think we've ever seen in the sport. So, Brad, having said all that, thoughts on Red Bull, and I guess what this means for the driver market as well.
Yeah. So first of all, good job for explaining it that way. I think you did a much better job than I would have done. I was surprised about the timing, and I really thought this was going to happen in the immediate aftermath when this all came out, because it sounds like you've read the WhatsApps. There was a point where everyone was getting them, and people could choose to look at them or not. And I read enough to become convinced that they were definitely genuine. It was too much, in my opinion. It was there was too much detail. It was too realistic for someone to have made all of that up. And plus there were no public denials that they were real.
Yeah, of course.
Everything seemed to add up. So I don't think there's question that what we saw there was happening. We don't know what physical things actually happen in the background, but you can infer from what we read. So I don't think, from a lot of our points of view, there's any question that there was some very inappropriate behaviour going on by Horner. And the thing I was probably most surprised by was that Jerry was willing, assuming she's seen the same things we have, that she was willing to stand by him and, and then put on a brave face on Drive to Survive and have the whole brushing under the carpet episode in Drive to Survive, where it's like, they're just all out to get me because I'm successful and not really acknowledging any of the, no responsibility taking and and getting to keep the job. Everything was like, yes, okay, I've been a bit embarrassed by this, but ultimately I keep my relationship, keep my position, and the person who caused the problem, the person who was seemingly the victim in this, gets moved aside, and the internal investigation doesn't find wrongdoing. So anyway, that's the background from my point of view. Never been a Horner fan. Never. You know very well, everyone who's ever heard me on this podcast before knows that I think Horner has in a very large part contributed to the toxicity of that particular team over the last few years. The gaslighting, 100%. The calling into question Lewis Hamilton's integrity, saying that the Silverstone move at Cops, which, by the way, I went through about 50 times today on track, thinking about that move over and over. Every time I go through there, I think it's crazy that a Formula One car goes through their flat. Anyway, all of that stuff, calling into question that he did it deliberately and all this kind of thing. So many examples where he has, I know you could argue he's doing his job, but I also argue that there's a way of doing that whilst maintaining integrity and actually not gaslighting everyone, and taking responsibility for bad actions of your personnel, like when Verstappen has done certain things. Anyway, you know my thoughts on Horner. So I'm, I can't say I'm like, really pleased. There's no major schadenfreude from my point of view that he's gone and he deserves it. I felt like the time has been missed. It should have been last year. It's been done now for less good reasons. At the time, if he'd been sacked at the time, it would have shown the company, the organisation, cared about values and didn't want someone like this being a part of the organisation. That wasn't the case at all. He stayed on, and now it's almost like a coup. They've finally convinced enough of the shareholders that he should go. And I think probably because it's a Verstappen won't stay unless Horner goes kind of a thing, no matter what. I mean, God bless Nico Rosberg for the way, I just love the way he doesn't care and will pry about these things on the grid. Like holding people like Jos Verstappen's feet to the fire and trying to make him answer that kind of question. I think this is what the situation is. I think it's a case of everyone is leaving because Horner, a lot of people like Newey publicly said, or at least it's become public, that one of the major reasons they left was because of Horner's actions. And the team has kind of been falling apart. It would be in last place without Verstappen. And I think someone's finally been told that the board, Max is going to leave and you're going to lose the one good thing remaining about the team unless Horner goes. And obviously they've gotten rid of the person who harms them, getting rid of who harms the team the least. And but I'm super happy, not because Horner's gone necessarily. I quite like having a team to dislike. I dislike Red Bull less now that Horner's gone, and now that Wheatley's gone, and that whole group, Horner, Verstappen, and Jos Verstappen, and GP and Wheatley, that whole kind of toxic group that tries to pretend that Verstappen can do no wrong and that hitting George Russell at Spain is like not a thing. All of those kind of, that group of people, the more they dissipate, the less I dislike the organisation. But it's also nice to kind of feel, as I alluded to earlier, that I think Red Bull are probably not going to be that good going forward.
I think
Max might be
come
stuck
to
at a place. Yeah, it might be not the best place to be in the next couple of years. And there might be an end point to how much benefit there is to being the entire focus on one driver. Like, that's all well and good when the car's quick enough, but as the car falls back and you need two drivers to develop, and ultimately, will the car be good enough for even Max to get near the front next year? Like, who knows?
We don't know.
If the engine's just not good enough, if the Ford engine just isn't that good, then it doesn't matter how good Verstappen is.
No, we just don't know, right? And I think I think some people are really happy to dance on others' graves, and I think people have dined out for a long time. From that fan base. But this was always around the corner, one way or the other, right? Like, what goes up must come down. And Red Bull have had an incredible 5 years. 4 years, 21 to 24. Especially last year, I think, kind of dragging out, clearly from like halfway, from less than halfway, dragging, Verstappen and McLaren should have won the driver's title last year. And they, and it was because of Verstappen's relentless ability to maximize absolutely every single, point that he should have got. He got wins he shouldn't have got. He got, I just think, I think for me, like that 100% out of all the titles he's won, the one I have the most respect for is definitely last season. Begrudgingly say that. But like key personnel leaving always results in backward steps. We've seen it happen at Mercedes. We saw it happen to Ferrari. We've seen it, and we're seeing it happen with Red Bull. You cannot lose the personnel that they've lost, the experience that those guys have, and not replace them with similar level. And maybe you can't replace them, but, and then obviously you're trying to build your own engines, something which is very much driven by Christian Horner, because, you've pretty much fallen out with every single, because of how toxic you are, you've fallen out with every single engine supplier. Like, no one would want to supply your engines. Honda have gone to be with Aston Martin in a works deal. They're not going to supply your engines. Renault won't go back. Renault don't even want to make engines anymore. So I just think, this is the end of an era, and it's as clear as day as looking at the end of the era in 2022 for Mercedes and saying like, well, this is done now. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, they're so far off. I cannot see a world where they, amidst all of this shit that's happening, you think it's bad on the track. I can't even imagine the turmoil they're going through trying to build a whole new engine from fucking scratch. Christian Horner, every 2 minutes, was trying to get these engines delayed. Even tried to bring through fucking V10s again, for fuck's sake. You're finished! Oh my God! You are finished! Very easy to sit in a house and throw stones. But when your house is leaking from the roof, there's mold in the walls, there's little slugs coming on your carpet, leaving that little white jizzy sludge that they do all the time. You man don't know the house that you're throwing stones from is crumbling. We'll see how many of you, man, are actually fans of Formula One and not just fans of the guy who seems to win all the time. Let's see the content that you make then. Let's see the comments that you leave under people's podcasts. And let's see if you stick around or if you fade into obscurity the same way you were before this lucky streak of a car came to light. We'll see. I won't say lucky streak. He's done really well. I would say also, I think it was quite poignant that Verstappen put in such a great performance on Saturday, like as the first competitive session after they've kicked out Horner, and it was basically like, new team principal. Verstappen still going to do what Verstappen does, maximize every opportunity, drive incredibly well, win races where he probably shouldn't win races. And it kind of did feel at that point like, wow, this is really his team now, isn't it?
Yeah, and if that's what he wants at all costs, then, if he's happy to stay there, because I don't know many other teams that would willingly quite put as much full focus on one driver as Red Bull have for him. And if he stays there, and if that's why he stays there, then I was going to say good luck to him, but I don't really actually want to wish him good luck. But then on his head be it, because that might be the thing which ends the wins for the next few years. It could. Who knows? But I can't. I might be entirely wrong, but I just can't see a world in which Red Bull, irrespective of how good their facility is and budget, etc., without the key personnel that have been instrumental in making the car that they had for the last couple of years, and obviously by extension this year, because it's the same rule set and some of the things that made the previous ones good will make this one good. When it comes to a full overhaul next year, and there's zero guarantees of things from this rule set connecting to the next one, especially with a different powertrain, I think there's every chance that Max ends up in a car which isn't competitive. But again, like a lot of these things, it's such a big change for next year. We're not going to know until next year, but it feels unlikely to me that Red Bull are the ones that end up with the best car. It feels more likely that Lance Stroll ends up with a championship-winning car than Max for next year. And I think we'll be away from this thing we've gotten used to, where we were talking about teams from front-running teams having a driver down in the bottom 15 because it's so tight. I don't think that's the case next year. I think it's Noah's Ark 2x2. Potentially, and if you got the quickest car, then you're definitely near the front. Anyway, let's see. It's interesting. I'm happy the team's falling apart a bit, and I like that. I like that Horner's gone, and that that Red Bull are no longer this smug, toxic group. It feels. I mean, some people I don't like are still there. Jos Verstappen is I listened to another podcast today where they described Jos Verstappen as effectively having been team principal for the last few months. Well, in their eyes, and team Jos Verstappen is a team I'm happy to see fail. So let's go.
Man,
let's go 2026.
Burn to the ground. Like I said it in 2021. People thought I was just chatting shit. You thought I was just... But I said to you, Verstappen winning the title was like the hyenas taking over the Pride Lands. And we're seeing the effect of that now. We are seeing the... Look, the Scar has brought in all the hyenas. Everyone else has left the Pride Lands. And, if you've got the hyenas running the show, let's see how it goes. But, would you rather... I don't know. Yeah, would you... Verstappen could be the captain of a sinking ship, essentially, and
exactly.
You're the captain, and we all respect you now. Can't do anything against you. Can't get rid of Helmut Marko. Can't get rid of your dad. Can't get rid of this person, that person, unless you say so. But if the performance of the car next year is as anyone with a brain in F1 is expecting, it's long for you, man. And because let me tell you, from experience, as you guys have so wonderfully outlined every 2 minutes, it's a long way down from the top. And it's not pretty. And it's not nice. And the people, be careful how you are to people on the way up, because they'll treat you the same on your way down. And you lot are in for... The F1 world has been waiting for this shit. And let me tell you, next season, you man are in for a treat. Anyway.
Flip side, counterpoint, he might actually still sign for Mercedes, kick Russell out, and have a dominant car next year and go on to beat all Hamilton's records. So that's the nightmare alternative solution here. So let's hope he stays at Red Bull.
They are begging for that. You can see they are begging for that Mercedes seat. I don't think Toto wants it. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think Toto's been using that. I think he's been using it, to be honest, as a way to negotiate with George. I don't personally. I could be wrong, but I don't see it personally, but I could be wrong. Right, look, that's more than enough. Me and you could probably end up talking all day. I've kept you for so long. Thank you so much. What a wonderful return this has been for me. Thank you so much, Brad.
Thanks for having me.
Where can people find your YouTube channel?
Yeah, so in the past I would have been telling people to go to Twitter, but as I said, my Twitter account's dormant now. So until such times that fixes itself, if it ever does, I'm not back there. So you can find me on YouTube. So just search for Brad Philpott on YouTube. My My YouTubing has gone exponentially upwards in the last 12 months.
Yeah, it's gone really well.
Now really dedicated a lot of time and effort to it, and to the point where there's a realistic chance that it could pay most of the bills in the next year and a half or so if it continues.
Awesome.
So go and check out some high quality karting content. I've specialized in karting stuff because it seems to be what people want, and it's what I enjoy doing.
It's great.
And so, for example, if you're listening now, I will probably obviously you're listening now if you can hear me, but you will see some interesting races that happened recently. It's not just me posting videos of me racing. There are storylines, there are things, there are series that continue over time, and there's also crazy things like this weekend I'm going out to not just break the lap record but to obliterate the lap record at a kart track in the UK, a very well-known kart track, by doing what Porsche. It's Daytona Milton Keynes. It's very central. It's a track that a lot of people have been to, and the lap record will have stood there for probably 10, 15 years. And we're going to go and break it by about 15 seconds in an unbelievably fast kart. And if you want to see that and see how that goes down, the aim is to be a bit like Porsche did with their Le Mans car a few years ago, where they went to the Nürburgring and Spa and they beat all the Formula One lap records and just did it because they could. And so that's what we're doing. Fun stuff like that. Go give me a like and a subscribe. And thanks for having me on Quick Stop.
Oh man, pleasure's all mine, and there's some really good content on there. So yeah, definitely go and check that out, guys. If you've got this far, thank you for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, please. I love reading all the comments. Tandy will be back at some point. She is international. You know, it's hard when you are literally on the fan stage at Silverstone presenting, big boy presenter. You know, you got to go take a summer holiday after that. So she's away abroad, but as soon as she's back, she will be back and we will have the main podcast, guys, back together. I've loved being back. Thank you for all the messages whilst I was away. Much appreciated. I will be back with daily content, so I guess I'll see you next time I see you. But if I don't see you, then have a lovely day. And remember, no matter what life throws at you, keep it on the black stuff. Until next time, toodle bib, goodbye.